Silence, please, all stand. Coroners closing our sitting.
Good morning. Today is the opening of the inquests into the deaths related to the 2019-2020 New South Wales bushfires and related inquiries into the fires.
May it please the Court, my name is Castleton and I appear with my learned friends, Ms Ward and Ms Stevens, as counsel assisting Your Honour into Your Honour's inquiry into the 2019-2020 bushfires and inquests into related deaths instructed by Mr Chi of the Department of Communities and Justice.
Thank you, Mr Castleton. The inquests relate to the deaths of Gwendolyn Hyde, Robert Lindsay, Julie Fletcher, George Knoll, Christopher Sava, Barry Parsons, Vivian Chaplin, Jeffrey Keaton, Andrew O'Dwyer, Russell Bratby, Samuel McPaul, Colin Burns, Patrick Solway, Robert Solway, John Smith, Richard Steele, Michael Campbell, David Harrison, Ross Rickson, Michael Clark, Rick De Morgan, Paul Hudson, Ian Macbeth, Lawrence Andrew, and John Butler. My thoughts are with their families and friends today. I now invite Yvonne Weldon, the chairperson of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, to welcome us to country.
Hello, ladies, gentlemen, sisters, brothers, and all the family members of those who lost lives in the Black Summer bushfires. My name is Yvonne Weldon. I am a Wiradjuriwoman from Cowra, here in New South Wales. I'm from the waters of the Clare, which later became known as the Lachlan, and of the Murrumbidgee Rivers. I am the elected chairperson of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, who are the culture authority under the Aboriginal Land Rights Act for the land that I am on. I would like to pay my respects to all elders past and present, to all First Nations and to everyone that is present today. Welcome to country is an age-old tradition. It is more than just words. It is a spiritual process. By honouring their ancestors' footsteps, we are all walking in. Continuing the practice of the many generations before us to the many generations to come. The boundaries of our traditional owners are known and are lived through my people's unbroken relationship with this country. The Eora Nation's country covers the Hawkesbury from the north, the Nepean in the west, and the Georges River in the south. On behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, the elders, and the members, I welcome everyone to the lands of the Barramadigal. I acknowledge the Barramadigal people whose spirits and ancestors will always remain with these lands, our Mother Earth. Across this beautiful continent of ours, there are hundreds of nations, tribes and clans that have existed here for over 60,000 years. The First Nations of this continent are the oldest continuously living culture of the world. And as we're all gathered today, let us all remember and reflect about the many lives that were lost, their families, friends, and communities. The towns and the communities that were struck with devastation, and the suffering that is still being felt by the loss of life and that of our flora and fauna. My people have always listened and learnt from each other, the environment, animals, elements, and our ancestors. We don't live in isolation of culture, spirit, land, and water because we are one. We need to reflect upon what has taken place to change what should never happen again. The Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council and I extend our deepest sympathy to the families who lost loved ones and to everyone that were impacted through responding, caring and helping. Our society, our state and this country are grateful for what you stood for and for what you have positively changed for all of our futures. To give us all strength, let us all draw upon my people's spirits as I continue on our journey. May my people's spirits walk with you and guide you as we strive forward for us all. Again, on behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, welcome to Barramadigal land. This always was, always will be Aboriginal land. My thoughts and my prayers are with you.
I thank Yvonne for her generous welcome to country. I hope that the families who have lost a loved one and all those affected by the bushfires who are listening today from all over the state will take strength and comfort from her powerful words. Before I ask Mr. Castleton to present his opening, I would like to make some acknowledgements. I acknowledge the fact that this hearing is being held on Aboriginal land. I acknowledge the Barramadigal people, the traditional custodians of the land upon which this court sits. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the lands affected by the bushfires and pay my respects to the elders past and present. Mr. Castleton.
Thank you, Your Honour. This is the opening of a series of coronial inquests and inquiries into the 2019-2020 New South Wales bushfire season. There were 11,774 fires across New South Wales during the 2019-2020 bushfire season, which lasted for 8 months, from July 2019 until March 2020. The 2019-2020 bushfire season was without doubt one of the most catastrophic on record. A statewide state of emergency was declared by the Premier 3 times between November 2019 and January 2020. Tragically, 25 people died in a manner connected to the fires, including 7 firefighters. The incalculable loss this represents to their families, friends and communities is acknowledged and will be remembered throughout the course of opening submissions today and the hearing dates that will follow over the coming months. In addition to these deaths, huge swathes of the state was burnt. Your Honour, how do we describe the scale of the loss? We can try and describe it numerically. The fire burnt over 5.52 million hectares of land, which equates to approximately 7% of the state's total land area, 39% of New South Wales State Forest and 35% of New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service estates. This was the largest recorded area of land burnt by bushfires in the state's history. Sadly, the fires destroyed 2,476 houses, 3 schools, 284 facilities, 5,559 outbuildings, and damaged 1,034 homes, 196 facilities, and 2,017 outbuildings. Almost 90,000 kilometres of boundary fencing was damaged during the 2019-2020 bushfire season, and according to some reports, the number of livestock confirmed to have perished across the state exceeds 13,000 in number. Although by no means limited to these regions, the 5 local government areas that lost the greatest total number of houses were Eurobodalla Shire Council, 510 houses were lost; Bega Shire Council, 465 houses were lost; Shoalhaven City Council, 286 houses were lost; Snowy Valleys Council, 193 houses were lost; and Clarence Valley Council, 168 houses were lost. Against that background, it is remarkable that the loss of life arising from these fires was not higher. It has been estimated that the national financial impacts are over $10 billion. On 28 May 2020, the Insurance Council of Australia advised the insurance claims from the bushfires in 2019 and 2020 across New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria and South Australia numbered 38,181, with estimated losses of $2.32 billion. New South Wales accounted for 81% of these losses, or $1.88 billion. These figures are important, but they cannot capture the human tragedy that sits behind the numbers, or the memories and sentimental belongings lost in the burning embers of one's home. It is the human stories that best help those of us who were not personally affected by the fires to understand how the events of that summer ravaged local communities and visitors alike. These hearings are conducted in the knowledge that the trauma and grief that the fires wrought persists long after the last flame was extinguished, and that as communities grappled with the immediate aftermath of the fires, they were further threatened by the arrival of COVID-19, and in some areas, further devastation later caused by flooding. Thus, whilst COVID-19 has affected all of us, it is particularly important to recognise the people who had to try and take shelter during the 2020 lockdown, in borrowed accommodation or bunkered down with family or friends, or who camped out in tents or caravans or sheds or makeshift shelters on their property, whilst trying to work out how to rebuild their lives, where to rebuild their lives, and how to keep safe from a pandemic. It is also important to recognise that these hearings commence during another COVID-19 lockdown, at a time when many people affected by the fires are still trying to work out where home is now. We must also remember that many of these fires had a devastating impact upon First Nations people, given their relationship to country and to their spirits and ancestors. Many nations, tribes and clans live in the fire-affected areas. The fires had a very significant impact upon flora and fauna. It has been described as an ecological disaster, with large numbers of native wildlife killed or injured, and with the loss of native forests and grasslands that served as wildlife habitat and house ecosystems. Over 330 threatened species and 37 threatened ecological communities protected under national environmental law were in the path of the fires. It is estimated that more than 800 million animals were killed in New South Wales as a result of the fires. More than 25% of the most suitable koala habitat in eastern New South Wales was within fire-affected areas. The Commonwealth Wildlife and Threatened Species Bushfire Recovery Expert Panel has released a list of 191 invertebrate species known or presumed to have been severely affected by the fires nationally. These hearings, therefore, begin by acknowledging the scale of the loss, even if it is so large that it is hard to truly comprehend or to calculate in any meaningful way. The loss of life, the destruction of property, and the sheer geographical reach of the fires triggered important investigations in the aftermath at a local, state and national level as follows. First, individual fires have been variously investigated by officers from New South Wales Police and New South Wales Rural Fire Service. Secondly, the New South Wales Parliament established the New South Wales Bushfire Inquiry, chaired by Mr Dave Owens, APM, and Ms Mary O'Kane, with the final report delivered on 31 July 2020. Thirdly, the Royal Commission into National Natural Disaster Arrangements was established with Air Chief Marshal Mark Binskins, AC, the Honourable Dr Annabelle Bennett, AC, SC, and Professor Andrew McIntosh, appointed as Royal Commissioners with the final report delivered on 28 October 2020. And fourthly, the Senate's Finance and Public Administration References Committee inquiry into lessons to be learned in relation to the Australian bushfire season 2019-20, with an interim report delivered on 7 October 2020. The terms of reference for the New South Wales inquiry included consideration of the cause of and factors contributing to the frequency, intensity, timing and location of bushfires in New South Wales in the 2019-20 bushfire season, including considerations of any role of weather, drought, climate change, fuel loads and human activity, and also responses to bushfires, particularly measures to control the spread of the fires and to protect life, property and the environment, including immediate management, including the issuing of public warnings, resourcing, coordination and deployment, and equipment and communication systems. The central task of the Royal Commission was to inquire into national natural disaster arrangements. The terms of reference for the Royal Commission included, relevantly, the responsibilities of and coordination between Australian, state, territory and local governments relating to natural disasters. The Senate Committee inquiry is focused on lessons to be learned in relation to the preparation and planning for, response to and recovery efforts following the 2019-20 Australian bushfire season. Areas of particular interest include hazard reduction, including existing hazard reduction practices, the possibilities for future hazard reduction regimes, and Indigenous burning practices and their efficacy. Next, the 2019-20 bushfire season and the level of recovery 1 year on, including the progress and status of recovery efforts. Next, mitigation infrastructure and land use planning, including an assessment of the types and costs of mitigation infrastructure that would effectively reduce risk in fire-prone areas. Next, insurance issues, the effects of fires on insurance premiums in fire-affected regions, 1 year on from the 2019-20 fire season. And lastly, aerial firefighting, including the establishment of a sovereign aerial firefighting fleet, the use of aerial resources and early suppression. The Senate inquiry is currently due to deliver a final report by the 2nd of December this year. Those assisting Your Honour will review and consider that report upon its publication. These coronial hearings sit within this context and cannot replicate the work of the other inquiries. Your Honour has neither the jurisdiction nor the resources to conduct a roving commission of inquiry into all potential matters arising from these catastrophic events. Some individuals and communities deeply impacted by the fires may be disappointed by decisions to focus on some matters and not others. That is regrettable but unavoidable in the circumstances. Your Honour, I now turn to the findings drawn from those preceding inquiries, dealing first, if I may, with the scale and progression of the bushfires. The majority of the land that burned in the 2019-2020 bushfire season was temperate, broadleaf forest, largely eucalyptus trees. In a typical fire season, approximately 2% of Eastern Australia's broadleaf temperate forest burns annually. In the 2019-2020 bushfires, approximately 20% of this forest biome was burnt. In a typical fire season, the fires moved from north to south. In the 2019-2020 fire season, the fires commenced in the central and southern New South Wales regions earlier than usual. The fire season started earlier and was longer in duration than a typical fire season. There was approximately 5 months in which fires were burning across the state. Many fires throughout New South Wales burned simultaneously and merged to create larger scale fires. I now turn to the severity of the bushfires. In New South Wales, the categories that measure fire severity are as follows. Unburnt is defined to mean unburnt surface with green canopy. Low is defined to mean understory fire with no impact on canopy. Moderate is defined to mean partial canopy scorch. High is defined to mean full canopy scorch and partial canopy destruction. And severe is defined to mean full canopy destruction. In the 2019-2020 bushfires, the severity of the bushfires impacting upon approximately 800,600 hectares, that is around 15% of the total area burnt in New South Wales, was categorised as high or severe. That is full canopy scorch and partial canopy destruction, or full canopy destruction. On 8 November 2019, for example, there was an unprecedented 17 fires for which emergency warnings, the highest alert level, had been issued. The Forest Fire Danger Index is a scale to measure fire danger ranging from low moderate, high, very high, severe, extreme and catastrophic. These levels were continually elevated across the 2019-2020 bushfire season. A rating of catastrophic was recorded in the northern region on 6 September 2019 for the Long Gully Drake Fire, which is the earliest ever recorded since the scale was introduced. Your Honour, I now turn to the very dry fuel. The available fuel throughout New South Wales was extremely dry and spatially contiguous through the forested regions. The fuel across the fire-affected parts of New South Wales was at least much drier than on average and likely the driest fuel on record in the state. The reasons for this very dry fuel were drought and increased temperatures. New South Wales experienced prolonged and widespread drought conditions leading up to the 2019-2020 bushfire season. There had been extreme rainfall deficiencies across the state and many years prior without significant drought relief. These harsh environmental conditions resulted, generally, in observations from those involved in fighting the bushfires that wet barriers and soft breaks in the landscape, which typically act as natural fire breaks, were dry. New South Wales also experienced its hottest and driest year on record in 2019. Overall, the meteorological trend observed in Australia is higher overall temperatures and reduced cool season rainfall. Significant global climate drivers contributed to the dryness of the 2019-2020 bushfire season. These drivers included a positive Indian Ocean dipole event, a combined southern annular mode, and a sudden stratospheric warming event, and a reduced cool season rainfall. I now address fuel load. Fuel loads were generally high across most of the fire-affected areas in New South Wales, but were no higher on average than they have been for the previous 30 years. These estimates of fuel load across the fire-affected areas of New South Wales are based on fire history data sets and fuel accumulation curves. There has been considerable debate in communities across fire-affected New South Wales in regard to whether the fuel load in certain areas was too high and whether various hazard reduction options could or should have been adopted. Hazard reduction includes any activity to reduce the amount of fuel or change the structure of fuel in order to reduce the rate of the spread, intensity and severity of bushfires and to increase opportunity for effective suppression of bushfires. The New South Wales Inquiry and the Royal Commission addressed the issue of land management, bushfire hazard reduction measures, traditional land management and cultural burning. Generally, during the New South Wales bushfire season, where the weather has been moderate, hazard-reduced areas contributed to the slowing of bushfires and provided some fire containment options. However, where the weather was extreme, fires ran through hazard-reduced areas and fuel load did not affect the spread, intensity and severity of the fires. Dealing now, if I may, with weather patterns, commencing with temperature. New South Wales experienced frequent heatwave conditions across the 2019-2020 bushfire season, defined as consecutive days and nights with high maximum and minimum temperatures. As a result of heat waves, fuel continued to dry at night and the fires continued to spread at night. As a general trend, this challenged firefighting efforts to catch up overnight and drained resources. I now come to the concept of fire-generated thunderstorms. The spread of extreme fires is driven not only by environmental conditions, but by dynamic interaction between the fire and the surrounding atmosphere. This dynamic interaction includes fire-generated thunderstorms. These thunderstorms occur when pyrocumulus clouds develop over fires and result in pyrocumulonimbus clouds, a fire-generated thunderstorm. In New South Wales during the 2019-2020 bushfire season, there were a record number of fire-generated thunderstorms. Across the state, these fire-generated thunderstorms were observed to develop rapidly and unexpectedly, create plumes of smoke above the fire, change the behaviour and force of the fire, generate lightning and gusting, increase ember travel and spotting, and generate sudden and extreme downbursts of wind in the vicinity of the fire-generated thunderstorm. I now deal with lightning strikes. Most of the fires of the 2019-2020 bushfire season were observed to be started by lightning strikes. The likelihood of ignition on the ground from a lightning strike is determined by the fuel moisture content and the nature of the point of ignition. Lightning is more likely to ignite a fire in very dry conditions. Dry, fine fuel is most likely to result in a fire from lightning. Fires started by lightning are generally more likely to create larger fires because they may start in remote locations and often in clusters. Preparedness. The pre-season outlook and briefings indicated the 2019-2020 bushfire season was going to be severe. New South Wales Rural Fire Service expressed pre-season concerns that long-term rainfall deficiencies had severely impacted water resources. The preceding months had been some of the driest on record, and as noted by the Bureau of Meteorology, by the start of September 2019, much of Eastern Australia was primed for high fire danger ratings. However, the New South Wales inquiry found that the scale of the actual fires took most from firefighting and land management agencies, as well as local councils and members of local communities, by surprise. Consequently, the New South Wales inquiry found that there did not appear to be a general understanding and preparedness in the community, even in high bushfire risk areas, of what could be coming. The New South Wales inquiry, for the most part, identified areas for improvement in public land management relating to the identification and management of fire trails, risk assessments, cross-agency and jurisdictional collaboration, access to water supply and hazard reduction. The New South Wales inquiry identified that tied to improving individual preparedness is the need to enhance community education and engagement and individual and community ownership of risk through nationally consistent, high-quality information. Your Honour, I now come to the fire agencies. In total, thousands of New South Wales firefighters from the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, National Parks and Wildlife Service, Fire and Rescue New South Wales, the Forestry Corporation of New South Wales and the State Emergency Service and other support personnel completed 277,415 shifts throughout the season. Throughout the bushfire season, New South Wales received significant assistance from 5,728 fire and emergency services personnel from interstate and internationally. Even so, firefighting resources in New South Wales were considerably stretched during the 2019-2020 bushfire season. Turning now, if I may, to the firefighting response. The extreme fire conditions in the 2019-2020 bushfire season challenged the pre-existing understanding within the field of fire science about how bushfires burn and spread in Australia. In some cases, traditional methods of firefighting and fire suppression proved unsuccessful due to, for example, the extreme dryness of the fuel and the intense ember spotting. Many fires across New South Wales were very challenging to contain due to difficult terrain, ignition in remote locations, and the very dry fuel. As the fires spread, many also became very difficult to contain and extinguish due to size, location, and dynamic fire behaviour. There was very limited capacity to fight fires at night. Contrary to conventional fire activity, many of the fires progressed significantly at night and in the early morning. I now turn to the use of backburning. Fire agencies use backburning as a containment method for many fires across the season. Backburning was characterised as either strategic, where it was used as a means to halt the fire, or tactical, where it was used to protect a particular asset or where there is a particular threat to containment lines. There were occasions where backburning was unsuccessful and broke containment lines, usually due to unforeseen wind changes and communication breakdowns. I apprehend that specific evidence will be received by the court where strategic backburning is directly linked to the cause and origin of a fire and or the manner and cause of a death that is the subject of an inquest. Turning now to communications infrastructure. During the 2019-2020 bushfires, there was significant fire damage caused to power infrastructure, namely poles, wires and substations. Electricity networks were extensively impacted by the bushfires. In New South Wales, there are also 818 telecommunication facilities affected by the bushfires, with 514 of these experiencing power outages of more than 4 hours. There was a high number of requests across the state for mobile generators, and there was only a limited supply available. The coordination of the distribution of mobile generators was coordinated by the Engineering Services Functional Area, which operates from within Resilience New South Wales. The communication failures were due more to power outages rather than direct fire damage to infrastructure. The main communications platforms for emergency services organisations during the 2019-2020 bushfire season in New South Wales was the Public Safety Network. This network provided mobile radio platform availability and allowed for interoperational communication between emergency services organisations via the use of shared radio channels. The Public Safety Network covered approximately 80% of the New South Wales population and approximately 33% of New South Wales at the relevant time. There were a number of limitations within this network. First, in areas not covered by the Public Safety Network, agencies relied on their own private mobile radio networks, where there was limited capability for wide area shared radio channels. Secondly, radio communication systems did not support heavy data traffic and visual or data streaming. Thirdly, there was no multi-state interoperational communication for wide area communications between New South Wales and Queensland firefighting vehicles. Across the state, some fire agencies had challenges communicating with each other. I foreshadow that Your Honour is likely to hear specific evidence on this issue of communication where it is directly linked to the cause and origin of a fire and or the manner and cause of a death. I now deal with public warning systems. Public information about the 2019-2020 bushfires was widely available throughout the season through a range of platforms. The public accessed information through social media, computer apps, websites, and television and radio. The New South Wales Rural Fire Service published tweets on Twitter and posts on Facebook from the official New South Wales Rural Fire Service Facebook page. The New South Wales Rural Fire Service, together with New South Wales Police and New South Wales State Emergency Services, also engaged in door knocking to alert residents to fire danger. The emergency alert is a national telephone warning system that was used in New South Wales by emergency services during the 2019-2020 bushfire season, where voice and text messages are sent to mobile phones within a defined area of an emergency. During active fire activity in this season, there were 430 emergency alert campaigns in which the New South Wales Rural Fire Service sent 340,600 voice messages and 2.14 million text messages. The New South Wales public also relied significantly on the Fires Near Me smartphone app. The Fires Near Me app provided information on fires in New South Wales and contained a watch zone function where an alert was sent to mobile phones when a fire entered a particular geographical zone and other developments. The Fires Near Me app had an extremely high uptake during the fire season, and it was the most searched term on Google Australia in 2019. The emergency alerts were not successful where there were power and telecommunication failures. The location-based text messages were found to be 81% successful. The address-based text messages were found to be 69% successful, and the voice messages were found to be 70% successful. There was extensive reliance on ABC radio for emergency warning updates and as a source of news and information about the bushfires. Some people in remote or regional areas without mobile telephone coverage had no means to call 000 and could not receive emergency alerts on the occasions where telecommunications infrastructure failed and landlines were not operational. Turning now, if I may, to Aboriginal land management programs. Aboriginal land management programs that incorporate cultural burning have been shown to result in a wide range of social, environmental and cultural benefits. There are opportunities for restoration and revitalisation of cultural practices in landscape health, along with benefits in managing bushfire risk. In the New South Wales inquiry, it was recommended that in order to increase the respectful, collaborative and effective use of Aboriginal land management practices in planning and preparing for bushfire, government commit to pursuing greater application of Aboriginal land management, including cultural burning, through a program to be coordinated by Aboriginal Affairs and Department of Planning, Industry and Environment, working in partnership with Aboriginal communities. This should be accompanied by a program of evaluation alongside the scaled-up application of these techniques. Your Honour, I now address the recommendations and response of the New South Wales Government. The New South Wales inquiry made 76 recommendations. On 25 August 2020, the New South Wales Government announced that all 76 recommendations would be accepted in principle, with further work to be done on specific timelines to give communities assurances that changes will be made to keep them safe. Any issues not covered in the report that are still relevant to the protection of property and life will also be further examined, and that Resilience New South Wales, led by Commissioner Shane Fitzsimmons, has been tasked with coordinating and overseeing the implementation of the inquiry's recommendations as the government finalises its approach. The New South Wales Government issues quarterly progress reports on the adoption of the recommendations. I now come to the recognition of heroism of community and all involved in responding to the fires. As these hearings proceed, the Court will hear about many individual acts of kindness, selflessness and bravery during the course of active firefighting efforts, but also in the lead up to and aftermath of the fires. Many of the people involved would no doubt say they don't consider themselves to be brave, but the observation of their bravery stands nonetheless. The court will also receive evidence demonstrating the ongoing resilience of local communities. Many would say they don't have a choice in this, that they have to keep going to confront all the world continues to throw at them. But the observation of their resilience stands nonetheless. The court will have an opportunity to acknowledge the work and dedication of emergency services personnel who put their own safety on the line to protect these communities, day after day, week after week, month after month during these catastrophic fires. Many of them did so when their own homes and family were at risk from the fires. 3 of them lost their lives a long way from home when their plane crashed in the course of firefighting efforts to contain the Good fire in southern New South Wales. There are families in the United States of America who will sadly follow these proceedings from the other side of the world. This court has jurisdiction to hold an inquiry concerning the cause and origin of a fire if Your Honour is satisfied that the fire has destroyed or damaged any property within the state. An inquiry must be held if requested to do so by an authorised official, meaning any of the following: the Commissioner of Fire and Rescue New South Wales, if the fire occurred in a fire district within the meaning of the Fire and Rescue New South Wales Act of 1989. The Commissioner of the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, if the fire is a bushfire within the meaning of the Rural Fires Act of 1997, or the Minister. Further, this court has jurisdiction to hold a general inquiry which extends to the examination of all of the circumstances, including but not limited to an examination of a fire's cause and origin, if Your Honour is of the opinion that a general inquiry should be held. Further, a general inquiry must be held if so requested by an authorised official. In relation to the 2019-2020 bushfire season, there has been no request by any authorised official to hold either a cause and origin inquiry or a general inquiry, and currently no direction has been given that any general inquiry should be held. The issue of whether a general inquiry or inquiries ought to be directed will be revisited during the course of these proceedings. Separate to an inquiry into a fire, this court has jurisdiction to hold an inquest concerning the death of a person in circumstances where it appears the person died a violent or unnatural death, the person died a sudden death, the cause of which is unknown, or the person died under suspicious or unusual circumstances. These categories are not exhaustive. An inquest must be held if the manner and cause of a person's death have not been sufficiently disclosed. For the benefit of the members of the public watching this address at home, it is further noted that the court has the power to make recommendations as considered necessary or desirable in relation to any matter connected with a death or fire with which an inquest or inquiry is concerned. I now come to the approach Your Honour will take to the matters arising from the 2019-2020 bushfire season. An information paper which outlines the approach adopted towards the conduct of these proceedings has been issued. A copy appears on the Coroners Court website. As previously noted, this court does not have the statutory power to conduct a whole-scale review into the 2019-2020 bushfire season. Further, having regard to the earlier broad-ranging inquiries to which I have already referred, there is limited utility, desirability and practicality in investigating matters which have already been traversed. Approximately 91 fires have been referred to the court. In each matter, the court has considered the respective briefs of evidence and made a provisional determination as to which matters will proceed to a cause and origin hearing. The list of fires to proceed to a cause and origin inquiry may be further reviewed, and some fires may be added or removed from that list as necessary. The court will conduct an inquiry into the fires that contributed to the deaths of the 25 individuals who tragically died in relation to the 2019-2020 bushfire season. For the purposes of these hearings, the state has been divided into 3 broad geographical regions: the southern region, the northern region, and the central metropolitan region. It ought to be noted that the catalogue of inquests and inquiries assigned to each region may be subject to change. Some fires have been grouped or regrouped with other fires in order to best manage this significant inquiry process. I will now outline the fire groupings and scheduled hearings, with apologies in advance should I mispronounce any location or the names of the Indigenous people whose country has been affected by these fires. The southern region of the state has been divided into two areas, the far southern and mid-southern areas. The far southern group of fires was initially scheduled to be heard from 6 to 17 September at Cooma, but regretfully will now be heard at Lidcombe. Incorporates the following inquiries in alphabetical order. The Adaminaby Fire in the Snowy Monaro local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Ngarigo people, burned for approximately 7 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 100,000 hectares. It impacted numerous townships, including Adaminaby, Mount Morgan, Mount Selwyn, Nungar and Shannon's Flat. At least 30 structures were destroyed or damaged. The Badger Forest Fire, Forest Road, in the Snowy Monaro and Urubadala local government areas, encompassed within the lands of the Yuin and Ngarigo people, burned for approximately 10 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 315,500 hectares. At least 1,800 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including many homes in Cobargo, Urubadala, Nerigunda, Verona and Wandella. Inquests will be held into the 7 related deaths connected to the Badger Forest Fire. Michael Clark, resident of Bodalla, who died after the fire reached his property on 23 January 2020. Robert Sorway and his son Patrick Sorway, residents of Wandella, who died after the fire reached their property on 31 December 2019. John Smith, resident of Nerigunda, who died after the fire reached his property on 31 December 2019. Ross Rickson, resident of Cobargo, who sustained burns when returning to his property on 31 December 2019, and in the weeks thereafter, died whilst an outpatient of Concord Repatriation General Hospital. Richard Steele, resident of Coolagolite, who died after the fire reached his property on 31 December 2019. And Colin Burns, resident of Bellaura and a New South Wales RFS volunteer of the Bellaura Brigade, who died after the fire reached his property on 31 December 2019. The Border Rockton Fire and Timbilica Fire. The Snowy 9 Banana Track Fire, which originated in Victoria, crossed over the New South Wales border over time into 2 different local government areas and accordingly was renamed the Border Fire and the Rockton Fire. These fires were initially managed separately but eventually burnt into one another. The Border Fire in the Bega Valley local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Yuin people, burned for approximately 9 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 192,500 hectares, including some land from Victoria. At least 439 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including many homes in Kaya, Timbilica, Toowoomba and Wonboyne. The Rockton Fire burned for approximately 9 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 26,300 hectares, including some land from within the Snowy Monaro local government area and Victoria. At least 20 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including homes in Rockton and Paddy's Flat. The Kundella Fire, or Daiua National Park Fire in Urubadala local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Yuin people, burned for approximately 2 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 2,500 hectares. no structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire. The Duns Road Fire, Ellerslie Range in the Snowy Monero local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Ngarigo people, burned for approximately 7 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 334,000 hectares. At least 1,024 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including the Selwyn Snow Resort and many homes in Batlow, Cunama, Tumbarumba, Wandalga and Yavern Creek. An inquest will be held into the death of David Harrison, a resident of Goulburn who had travelled to his friend's property in Wandalga, where he died after the fire reached the property on 4 January 2020. East Ernie Creek Fire, Ellerslie Range in the Snowy Monero local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Ngarigo people, burned for approximately 2 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 407 hectares. At least one home was destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire. The Green Valley Talmalmo Fire in the Greater Hume local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Wiradjuri people, burned for approximately 8 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 46,000 hectares. At least 106 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including many homes in Jingellic and Ernie and Talmalmo. An inquest will be held into the death of Samuel McPaul, RFS firefighter of the Morven Brigade who died while on duty at the Green Valley Talmalmo Fire at a private property in Jingellic on 30 December 2020 after the fire tanker he was in was hit by extreme winds associated with a pyrocumulonimbus fire thunderstorm and was overturned. The Werryberry Fire in the Bega Valley local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Yuin people, burned for approximately 4 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 30,000 hectares, including the Wadbilga National Park, Bamboka and Numbaga. At least 110 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire. I come now to the mid-southern group of fires. These fires were scheduled to be heard from 20 September until 1 October this year at Queanbeyan, but regretfully will now need to be heard here at Lidcombe. The mid-southern group of fires incorporates the following inquiries in alphabetical order. The Charlie's Forest Fire, Monga National Park, in the Queanbeyan, Pallarang local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Namburai and Ngunnawal people, burned for approximately 7 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 64,000 hectares. At least 108 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including many homes in Narraga and Wagwag. The Clyde Mountain Fire in the Eurobadalla local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Yuin people, burned for approximately 7 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 100,000 hectares. Approximately 1,500 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire. During the inquiry into the cause and origin of this fire, it is anticipated that evidence will be led that this fire was an extension of the Carawan Fire, which spread east from the Shoalhaven local government area to the Eurobadalla local government area when it crossed the Clyde River as a result of spot fires emanating from ember attacks. The Carawan Fire, Clyde Ridge Road Fire, commenced in the Carawan State Forest and spread to a number of different local government areas and was managed separately as 4 individual fires, namely the Carawan, Clyde Mountain, Charlie's Forest and Morton Fires. The Carawan Fire in the Shoalhaven local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Yuin people, burned for approximately 11 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 315,000 hectares. At least 1,428 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including many homes from Carawan North to Tapitali and west to Sassafras. The inquest will be held into the 3 related deaths Lawrence Andrew, resident of Yati Yata, who died after the fire reached his property on 31 December 2019, John Butler Sr., also resident of Yati Yata, who died after the fire reached his property on 31 December 2019, and Michael Campbell, resident of Sussex Inlet, who died after the fire reached his property on 31 December 2019. The Morton Fire, Morton, in the Wingecarribee local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Ngambri and Ngunnawal people, burned for approximately 6 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 23,000 hectares. At least 27 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including many homes in Bundanoon, Merilla and Winjallo. The North Black Range, Palarang Fire in the Queanbeyan Palarang local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Ngarigo, Ngambri and Ngunnawal people, burned for approximately 2 months and damaged an area of approximately 40,000 hectares within the Telangana National Park. At least 30 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire. The Tianjara Fire, Braidwood Road Fire, in the Shoalhaven local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Yuan people, burned for approximately 1 week and damaged an area of approximately 22,000 hectares. No structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire. The Good Fire, Peakview Fire, scheduled to be heard at Cooma from 9 to 13 May next year in the Snowy Monero local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Ngarigo people, burned for approximately 9 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 42,500 hectares. At least 50 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including many homes in Carnagany, Durangle and Numerala. An inquest will be held into the deaths of United States residents and the employees of Coulson Aviation, Captain and Pilot Ian Macbeth, First Officer and Co-Pilot Paul Hudson, and Flight Engineer Rick De Morgan Jr. These men died in a plane crash on 23 January 2020 during firefighting operations at the Good Fire. A separate investigation is being conducted by the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, which will likely inform the approach Your Honour ultimately takes to the inquest into each of these deaths. I now come to the northern region. The northern region of the state has been divided into 3 areas: the far northern, mid-northern and lower northern areas. The far northern hearings, scheduled to take place at Lismore Local Court from 28 February to 4 March next year, include the following inquiries in alphabetical order. The Busby's Flat Fire, also known as the Rapville Fire, in the Richmond Valley local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Bunjalung people, burned for 2 months and damaged an area of approximately 50,000 hectares. Approximately 200 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including properties in Bungawalban, Busby Flat, Ellengowan, Myrtle Creek, Rapville and Wyne. This fire merged with the Long Gully Road Drake Fire. The Gulf Road Fire in the Tenterfield local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Jukumbul, Kamilaroi and Bunjalung people, burned for 5 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 75,000 hectares, impacting the townships of Emmaville and Torrington. At least 70 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire. The Long Gully Road Drake Fire, predominantly in the Tenterfield local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Jukumbul, Kamilaroi and Bunjalung people, burned for approximately 2 months and damaged an area of approximately 75,000 hectares. At least 50 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire. This fire also merged with the Busby Flat Fire. An inquest will be held into the deaths of 2 residents of Coombar, Robert Lindsay and Gwendolyn Hyde, who died in connection with the fire which reached their property on 8 October 2019. The Mount Mckenzie Road Tenterfield Fire occurred in the town of Tenterfield, Within the lands of the Jukambil, Kamilaroi and Bundjalung people, it burned for approximately 2 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 3,000 hectares. At least 20 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire. The Mount Nardi fire, Nimbin, in the Lismore and Tweed local government areas, encompassed within the lands of the Bundjalung people, burned for approximately 9 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 7,000 hectares. It impacted the Nightcap National Park, Wine State Conservation Area and several townships. At least 10 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire. I come now to the Mid-Northern hearings. These hearings are scheduled to take place at Armidale Local Court from 7 to 18 March next year and include the following inquiries in alphabetical order. The Bees Nest Fire in the Clarence Valley Local Government Area, predominantly within the Guy Fawkes River National Park and encompassed within the lands of the Bundjalung, Gumbaynggee and Yagal people, burned for approximately 11 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 110,000 hectares. The fire impacted several townships, including Bosterbrick, Hernany and Tyringham. At least 40 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire. The Carrai Creek Fire was the largest fire in the northern region, predominantly affecting areas of National Park in the Kempsey local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Dungeti people. It burned for 3 months and damaged an area of approximately 240,000 hectares. The Carrai East Fire, Willawarrin, also known as Jacob Spur Fire, in the Kempsey local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Thungati and Dungati people, burned for approximately 3 months and damaged an area of approximately 150,000 hectares. The fire impacted the townships of Willawarrin, Bellbrook and Temagog. At least 330 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire. An inquest will be held into the death of a resident of Willawarrin, Barry Parsons, who died in connection with the fire, which reached his property on 8 November 2019. The Kamara Road Retreat Amaroo Fire in the Tamworth Regional Council area, encompassed by the lands of the Kamilaroi people, consisted of several associated fire incidents which merged, spanning a total period of approximately 4 weeks. The fire damaged an area of approximately 3,000 hectares and impacted the townships of Retreat and Watsons Creek. The Kangawalla Fire, Die Hard, in the Glen Ennis 7 local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Narrabul people, burned for 4 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 12,000 hectares. At least 150 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including Waitaliba School and many homes in Waitaliba and Newton Boyd. An inquest will be held into the deaths of 2 residents of Waitaliba, George Knoll and Vivian Chaplin, who died in connection with the fire which reached their properties on 8 November 2019. The Kean Road Fire, South Arm, in the Nambucca Valley local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Gumbaynggee people, burned for approximately 9 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 30,000 hectares. It impacted numerous townships, including Barrowville, Buckra Bendini, Nambucca, South Arm, Tal Arm and Yarranbella. At least 230 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire. An inquest will be held into the death of a resident of South Arm, Christopher Sapper, who died in connection with this fire, which reached his property on or about 8 November 2019. The Liberation Trail Fire, primarily in the Clarence Valley local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Bundjalung, Gumbaynggee and Yagal people, burned for approximately 8 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 180,000 hectares across multiple local government areas. It impacted numerous townships, including Blackslands Creek, Glenray, Kangaroo Creek, Namboida and Nana Glen. At least 370 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire. The Marl Creek Fire, Bora Ridge Fire in the Richmond Valley local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Bundjalung people, burned for approximately 7 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 120,000 hectares. At least 140 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire. The Stockyard Flats Fire, Yarrawitch, in the Walker local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Dungutty people, burned for 2 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 70,000 hectares. The fire impacted the townships of Yarrawitch and Walker. At least 40 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire. An inquest will be held into the death of a resident of Yarrawitch, Russell Bratby, who died in connection with the fire which reached his property on 7 November 2019. Turning now, if I may, to the lower northern hearings. These hearings are scheduled to take place at Taree Local Court from 21 to 25 March next year and include the following inquiries in alphabetical order. The Bills Crossing Crowdy Bay Fire in the Mid-Coast local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Birapai people, burned for approximately 9 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 13,400 hectares. At least 8 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including homes in Coralville, Harrington and Johns River. An inquest will be held into the death of one resident of Johns River, Julie Fletcher, who died after the fire reached her property on 8 November 2019. The Falford Road Durrawank Fire in the Mid-Coast local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Warramai people, burned for approximately 3 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 3,000 hectares. At least 16 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including homes in Durrawank, Falford and Hallidays Point. The Goldens Road Foster Fire in the Mid-Coast local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Warramai people, burned for approximately 2 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 51 hectares. At least 4 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including homes in Foster. The Goddo's Road Fire in the Nundle State Forest within the Tamworth Regional local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Kamilaroi people, burned for 1 month and damaged an area of approximately 1,000 hectares, primarily affecting a commercial pine plantation. The Hillville Fire, Hillville, in the Mid-Coast local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Warramai people, burned for approximately 3 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 31,300 hectares. At least 160 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including homes in Hillville, Kooringat, Old Bar, Rainbow Flat and Tinanee. The Minimbar Fire, Aerodrome Road, Nabiac, in the Mid-Coast local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Warramai people, burned for approximately 7 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 4,400 hectares. At least 6 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including homes in Minimbar, Nabiac and Tuncurry. The Rumba Complex Fire, Dingo Tops Road, Tappan Tops National Park, in the Mid-Coast local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Birapai people, burned for approximately 14 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 153,200 hectares. At least 134 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including many homes in Bobbin, Caffrey's Flat and Kapara. The Thunderbolts Way Bretty Fire in the Mid-Coast local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Birapai people, burned for approximately 10 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 24,400 hectares. While no structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, the Bretty Nature Reserve and the Norwich State Forest were largely impacted. Your Honour, I come now to the Central Metropolitan hearings. These hearings are scheduled to take place at Katoomba Local Court from 14 June to 1 July next year and include the following inquiries in alphabetical order. The Gosper Mountain Fire, Wallamai National Park. was the biggest bushfire from a single ignition point in Australian history. This fire, which was within the Blue Mountains, Central Coast, Cessnock, Hawkesbury, Lithgow and Singleton local government areas, burned for approximately 8 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 512,600 hectares. It traversed the lands of the Darug, the Gunungara, the Awabahakal, the Dakingnang, the Wiradjuri and the Wunawarran and the Wanarua people. At least 146 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including Elm Heights Youth Camp in Melong and homes in Colo Heights, Mount Wilson, Mount Irvine and Warrawarralong. The Green Wattle Creek Fire, Lake Burragorang, in the Goulburn, Mullawaree, Oberon, Upper Lachlan, Wingecarribee and Wallandilly local government areas, encompassing the lands of the Gunungara, Wiradjuri and Tharawal people, burned for approximately 11 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 278,200 hectares. At least 60 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including many homes in Balmoral, Bargo, Buxton and Oakdale. An inquest will be held into the deaths of 2 New South Wales Rural Fire Service firefighters, Geoffrey Keaton, Deputy Captain of the Horsley Park Rural Fire Brigade and a former member of the Plumpton Brigade, and Andrew O'Dwyer, member of the Horsley Park Rural Fire Brigade, who both died on 19 December 2019 while on duty at the Green Wattle Creek Fireground near Buxton after the fire truck they were travelling in was struck by a burning tree. The Grosse Valley Fire, Mount Wilson Fire, in the Blue Mountains and Greater Lithgow local government areas, encompassing the lands of the Darug, the Gunungara and Wiradjuri people, burned for approximately 8 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 20,000 hectares. At least 67 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including homes in Bell, Barrambing, Bilpin, Clarence, Dargan, Currajong Heights, Lithgow and Mount Tomah. The Little L Complex Fire, Laguna, in the Singleton local government area, encompassing the lands of the Wanarua people, burned for approximately 9 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 171,400 hectares. At least 30 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including many homes in Laguna and Paynes Crossing. The Palmer's Oakey Fire, Upper Turon, in the Mid-Western regional local government area, encompassing the lands of the Wiradjuri people, burned for approximately 8 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 17,400 hectares. At least 17 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including homes in the Running Stream area. The Ruin Castle Fire, Kadumba Valley, which was within the Blue Mountains local government area, encompassing the lands of the Darug and the Gunungara people, burned for approximately 10 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 17,000 hectares. Various New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including huts and outbuildings. Lastly, Your Honour, the 3 Mile Gunderman Fire, Darug National Park, which was within the Central Coast local government area, encompassing the lands of the Darug people, burned for approximately 7 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 46,000 hectares. At least 4 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including homes in Spencer and Mangrove Mountain. At the conclusion of these hearings, the Court will adjourn all matters generally. This means the Court will not immediately make findings as to the manner and cause of death or the cause and origin of a fire, unless special reasons exist to do so. The Court will review the evidence and issues raised in each matter and determine which issues will proceed to further consideration via a representative case study. The hearing of those representative case studies will be conducted at the Coroners Court at Lidcombe at a later date sometime next year. The Court is required to and will strive to give procedural fairness to all parties with a sufficient interest who participate in the hearing. There may at times be a robust exchange of views, but this will be conducted in a respectful way that gives conflicting opinions on legitimate questions an opportunity to be heard, whether orally or in writing. Given the voluminous amounts of material and the challenging timetable, the Court has issued practice directions on matters of procedure. A virtual courtroom protocol and a media and live streaming protocol have been issued to ensure the smooth running of these proceedings, which have adapted on account of the current public health orders. A copy of these documents can be found on the Coroners Court website, and I encourage all to familiarise themselves with these documents. The Court would like to hear from those who have been directly affected by the bushfires about their experiences. Submissions are invited from bushfire-affected residents, emergency and support personnel, organisations and the public. Submissions have already been received in relation to the southern region fires, and each one has been read and considered by the team assisting Your Honour. These early submissions have proved invaluable in highlighting unique perspectives and insights that will be weighed in the balance when determining which matters might proceed to a representative case study. We extend thanks to those who have taken the time to make those submissions. The deadline for submissions on the northern and central metropolitan region fires have been extended and will be accepted by Friday, 1 October this year. Information about the submission process can also be found on the Coroners Court website. In the immediate aftermath of the fires, Your Honour was able to visit and view some of the affected communities on the far south coast. Your Honour was also able to visit and view some of the other affected areas on the south coast earlier this year, shortly before the current COVID-19 lockdown commenced. With the assistance of New South Wales Police, Your Honour has been able to survey bushfire damage in the southern region from the air. Those assisting Your Honour acknowledge that these efforts, important in their own way, cannot make up for the fact that these hearings are being conducted far from the scene of the fires. As referred to earlier, the first 4 weeks of hearing were due to be held in Cooma and Queanbeyan. Even those two locations are physically distant from the scene of many of the southern fires. But by sitting in those regional towns, at least some people directly affected by the fires would have been able to attend court in person. It is regrettable that the hearings for the far southern region will now have to be broadcast from the Coroners Court complex at Lidcombe in Sydney. It is regrettable that with the current public health orders, witnesses will have to give evidence remotely and members of the public and media will also have to watch proceedings remotely. It is regrettable but necessary that the public health orders also prevent the court and the legal representatives from visiting the scene of the fires and the affected communities in a way that might enhance the understanding of the evidence of certain witnesses. Your Honour, these are concerning times. The only thing we can confidently predict at the outset is that the response to COVID-19 is likely to impact upon the planned conduct of these proceedings in ways that none of us can presently anticipate. It will require a level of patience and goodwill from all concerned for the hearings to proceed in accordance with current plans. We must, however, try to use court time as best as one can, because we cannot be certain that future bushfire seasons will not pose similar challenges and risks as the 2019-2020 season, and we should all try to prepare for that as best as one can. Your Honour, that concludes my opening remarks. May it please the Court.
Thank you very much, Mr Castleton. I just want to say at this point that applications for leave in relation to the southern region will be taken on the 6th of September.
May it please, Your Honour. Your Honour, for abundant caution, can I clarify publicly that the far southern region relates to the following inquests and inquiries: the Adaminaby Complex Fire, Adaminaby, the Badger Forest Fire, Forest Road, an inquest into the following 7 related deaths: Colin Burns, Michael Clark, Ross Rickson, Patrick Sorway, Robert Sorway, John Smith, Richard Steele. the Border Rockton Fire, Timbilica, Kundella Fire in the Dooya National Park, Duns Road Fire, Ellerslie Range, and the inquest into the related death of David Harrison, East Ernie Creek Fire, Ellerslie Range, Green Valley Taumalmo Fire, and the inquest relating to the death of Samuel McPaul, the Werryberry Fire, Wabilliga National Park. Can I also clarify for abundant caution, the mid-southern region relates to the following: the Carawan Fire, the Carawan Cluster and the North Black Range, and inquest will be held in relation to the related deaths concerning Michael Campbell, Lawrence Andrew and John Butler. May I please, Your Honour.
Thank you, Mr Castleton. In respect of the mid-southern region hearing, which was scheduled to be heard in Queanbeyan from the 20th of September, regrettably, due to the current public health orders, those proceedings will now need to be transferred to the Coroners Court complex here at Lidcombe.
That's so, Your Honour.
I thank everyone who's been involved on this live stream. Unless there's anything else, Mr Castleton, I will adjourn these proceedings to the 6th of September.
May I please, Your Honour.
Please all stand. Coroners closed. Now adjourned.